we define like, recruiting at a startup versus recruiting a company? And they have brought up a really good point, like, well, it's actually firefighting it everywhere. So almost all recruiting teams ever are constantly running, without enough bandwidth, enough resources, and a ton of pressure. How do you actually then hire well? Because it's not necessarily that like, oh, startups, it must be easier to establish trust and, do this. But I'm like, well, not from what I've seen. So I'll mention a couple of things that I think might be helpful. So one, a little bit more like mindset, and then a little bit more practical. So I am noting that my fellow panelists and I are noticing that, this stuff is hard and it requires work. And that's absolutely true. It's not something that you can just outsource, hope that someone else will do it for you. Like who's going to do it? That you really have to get good at it and learn how to do it. And I think there's a way that it's hard, but maybe what's hard is not that it's like intellectually super difficult, but that we're exhausted. When we've been all taught that recruiting is supposed to be this really high volume, massive, like just get as big as candidate pool as possible and pick up people. And the success of recruiters are often measured based on literally volume, not necessarily the quality of hires, but just how busy they are. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the best practices in our function is really about measuring busyness and activity as opposed to truly effective solutions that aren't going to be as measurable. So I want to mention this because, whether you're coming at it from a startup or a larger company, a lot of what we're saying, you're like, yes, it is hard. And what are some ways you're maybe not set up for success? Because maybe you have to start saying no to things. Mm. Maybe you have to start actually pushing back on a hiring manager's unreasonable requests. Maybe if you're a recruiting leader, you need help actually pushing back against unreasonable hiring goals that some combination of finance exec team just kind of like dumps on you. Go double by end of the year, but we're not going to give you any new resources. Good luck. And then when the company inevitably fails to meet those goals, who gets blamed but you? So instead of letting that happen, a lot of it is like, actually examining the work that you're doing. Notice when you're not set up for success. Push back, advocate for more resources. Maybe you need to hire more recruiters. Maybe you need more tools. Maybe you need to attend startup recruiting bootcamp. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like, I personally love recruiting. It's been a love-hate relationship for my entire career, but I think it's fantastic. And there are times I've, wanted to quit for this reason. And this is some of the advice that I wish someone told me. So that was like the mindset. And then I'll speak a little bit more about the more practical things. So this is going to be a boring answer, but it's so true. Once again, I wish someone else told me this early in my career. So much of great recruiting is going to happen collaboratively. And to do collaborative recruiting, you need to document your processes really, really well. Mm. So what I mean by this is whether you're at a growing startup or running at a large company, a lot of our battle in really every function, not just recruiting, is tribal knowledge. If I'm a new hire at a company and Ozzy is my engineering manager, what is trapped in Ozzy's head that I need to get? But I'm a nice human, so I don't want to like ping him all day long on Slack and he's going to get annoyed at me. So documentation is something that all companies have to get really, really great at and process. And this is something that recruiting teams I personally have found to be a little bit lacking. Maybe it's because a lot of recruiters are self-identified extroverts. Anyone? Who find that, like I like talking. I don't have time to like write, little pieces of information about how to actually run an interview panel, I just want to talk to my hiring manager. I don't want to write things down. Also, the volume problem that we talked about. It's really, really difficult to actually like pause, carve out an hour or two when you have Slacks and interviews all day. Mm-hmm. So everyone who I think is attending and listening to this conversation really has a choice. It might not feel like it, and I understand why, because this work can be very draining. and you never feel like you have enough time.
It's true. And you have the same 24 hours in the day as like Beyonce, but I'm like, her 24 hours are a lot different than, that of a recruiter's, because, she has resources, and that's why she's able to do all the things that she can do. Look what happens when you have a well-resourced organization. And so to that end, really, really good. And so
I'll just finish this one point. I wish every recruiter and every hiring team was already resourced, but they're not.
Yeah.
Right. So who is going to like make that aware? It's up to you to try to like, okay, let me push for this. Let me ask this question. Let me bring in this resource. You can be that difference maker, but I understand why it's hard. That's why there's, this conversation, communities, the different things that we offer available for help.